Well, welcome back. And I have just a short thing for you here. And I think it's really important. And today I was listening to a report on Dennis Prager. Now, if you don't know who Dennis Prager is, he set up Prager University. He is a believing Jew, doesn't believe in Christ, but he's a practicing Jew, I should say, and a deep thinker, and would be in the same sort of pool as, the Jordan Petersons and the Charlie Kirks and these kind of conservative, no-nonsense thinkers, those kind of people. A year and a half ago or so, it could have been 2 years ago, he fell at home. He fell off a ladder, as I understand, and he fell in such a way that he became a quadriplegic. You think, my gosh, okay, you're a quadriplegic. And there have been some updates, and he's battled back, and he's had some real setbacks as he's tried to recover. And you probably know someone like this, someone who has gotten cancer or had a heart attack or something like that. And, they really got hit with it. And, kind of along the way, they had a couple things that gave a little bit of hope. It was the initial chemotherapy treatment that really seemed to, take effect way better than the doctors thought. It was the ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease diagnosis that the person lived actually quite well for, say another 10 years or something like this. And these people at Prager University, PragerU online, you can see it on YouTube. Dennis Prager, he had gone back into the hospital, and they said, the doctors are looking at it as like, well, you should give up hope now, say goodbye now. And, he's a fighter, and he fought back, and so God's hand was in this, God blessed us and that kind of thing.
Dennis continues to be an absolute miracle. And I think the miracles are happening because of the prayers and the love and the blessings that he is receiving. And
every time I see that kind of thing, I think, well, where was God? Where was God when this stuff happened? If you want me, if I was Dennis Prager, I said, God, you really want to bless me? Don't paralyze me and then give me a day of good treatments. Just don't paralyze me at all. Or what I think is more biblical, heal me completely. I just want to take you through a few things in the Bible, because here's my theory. In the Bible, you get healed completely, or you don't get healed. But there's none of this, a big problem, and then you kind of have a good day, and that's God sort of messing with the knobs a little bit, and then you feel a little bit better. Of course, we should give God glory in all things. He holds the universe together, yeah? And he gets the glory in all things, and we should be thankful as Christians in all situations. But to imagine that God has sort of reached out of heaven and has turned our fate one way or another, I think is more of this sort of magic Jesus stuff that I really, really am allergic to. Let's just go through a few, see if I can prove my point to you. Well, one would be Paul's thorn in the flesh. We don't know what it was. We think it could have been his eyes, but it could have been any kind of thorn in the flesh. And, he prayed about this 3 times, and he had prayed earlier. He had prayed for people. He had sent his handkerchief, and people were healed. People had a good day that day, and the next day they were feeling sick again. No, they were healed. Okay, so that's one for Paul, that, he prays for this, but Christ says, my grace is sufficient. And I think that's where we actually need to end up. Timothy's stomach problems, same kind of thing. Take a little wine, because, you're not going to get a miracle. This is a new dispensation in the Bible, and you're not going to have signs and wonders. So get used to it and take a little wine with your with your food. Now we know also that Epaphroditus in Philippians 2:27, he was sick nigh unto death. Wow. And then Paul says, and God had mercy on him. Okay. But he got well. It wasn't that, last night he didn't have a headache, but this morning the fever's back and he's shivering in bed and all that kind of stuff. It wasn't anything like that. And if we look at some of the stuff that Jesus did, the blind man at Bethsaida, he puts this kind of mud that he made with his spittle and some dirt, and he puts this on the man's eyes. And, he says, go wash that stuff off. And the man could completely see. So he didn't restore it for one day. He didn't restore it, in the beginning. He says, well, what do you see? He says, I see, men walking as trees, these sort of long vision. And you can imagine if you've ever come out of, had something in your eyes or something like that. It's not about the sight, maybe the tears on his eyes, maybe this mud and spittle, and he needs to wash it off to see him. But he's completely healed. If we look back in the Old Testament to Naaman, it doesn't say he was 50% healed of his leprosy. No, he was a skeptic. He was like, oh, do I have to walk into this dirty river? Well, these Jews call a river. And that's going to cleanse me. And his friends are like, look, what do you got to lose? We're here. Just do it. And he was like, oh, okay. And then it worked, and he was completely healed. And of course, as you know the story, he got a bunch of Israel's dirt so he could take, God's land back home with him and have something to pray on and that kind of thing. The lame man in Acts 3, who walks with a cane or walks with a limp. And, he goes away leaping and praising God. And, you see these healers on TV and they say, be healed. And, these people that, they have a shoulder problem, be healed. And they're sort of like, I'm really trying to believe this. And, your mind can convince you that you are healed. I'm sure there are people that could not stand up out of a wheelchair, and they got up there and the adrenaline is flowing. So, you give yourself your own adrenaline jump and you can do all kinds of stuff. But that wears off. I mean, there are no ministries out there that say, well, we came in and we popped this person in the forehead and popped that person in the forehead, and they walked off and they're cured from ALS and they were cured from heart disease. They're cured from cancer. We went back a year later. Here's the line of those people. Look at them. They're just glowing with health. You have never seen that. And that's because it's bunk. Let's look at a couple more of these. Blind Bartimaeus. It doesn't say Jesus improved his eyesight. No, he was immediately received his sight. The 10 lepers. It wasn't these lepers had reduced lesions and some of them could actually feel their fingertips again. No, they were cleansed. Malchus's ear, these guards that came up and were going to grab Jesus and take him off to be crucified. And Peter said, not on my watch. And he swung his sword and this guy got his ear lopped off. And Jesus put it back on. But they had to stitch it up real good and keep it clean. And it was just on there, and nothing about scarring, nothing about sort of partially back on there. Lazarus was dead. He was not just dead. He was dead. Peter, what do you mean by dead? Well, there was a tradition among the Jews that, within 3 days, we've seen people revive. Let's not make a mistake. So you're only completely, totally dead 3 days after you were dead, as a precaution. And that's why Jesus, when he heard that Lazarus was sick, just hung out a couple more days. Like, what is this? I thought you would jump up and go to him. No, he didn't. He just hung out for a while. And on the 4th day, he got there so that no one could say, well, he wasn't dead. He was dead. And Jesus came and healed him, no, resurrected him, not to newness of life, but resurrected him, resuscitated him. That's a little bit better. So Naaman was healed. Jeroboam's hand was completely restored. Elijah and Elisha were able to raise dead children. It wasn't that they were, zombies and they could go back and say goodbye to their family and then fall over dead. It's always complete restoration. Now you might say, well, there's some exceptions, and you might be right. For example, Job, he lost all of his kids, and all of his cows and all that kind of thing. Now, he was restored double with all of this. I think he had like 10 kids and, probably got back 20. He got, 10 sons and 10 daughters or something like this. But, you can say, well, he didn't, didn't get back everything. But he was restored double, for that. And he was, had recovered from whatever ailment had him scraping his skin with potsherds and dogs coming up and licking him. So when God heals, the blind see. They go from being blind to 100% seeing. The lame go from limping or being carried on a litter or something like that to walking and leaping. Lepers are completely restored and completely clean. And you can imagine, the ends of your fingers and then your nose and, this came back. They're completely restored. And of course, in the examples of Jairus' daughter and Lazarus and a couple others, you see that people who were dead are resuscitated, are brought back to life supernaturally. Now, we are in the dispensation of grace, and this doesn't happen. If you go to the Gospels, you would think that it should happen, because you'll read in Mark, and you see what signs will follow Christians. They'll heal the sick and the lame, and they'll raise the dead. And I say, go to the nearest hospital and empty it. Oh, maybe we could do one floor. No, empty it. You can't, because it doesn't go with our dispensation. That was the gospel of the kingdom. And of course, that's why you hear, yes, but I heard that people who were deaf in Thailand in a small village, and, I think Francis Chan went out and did this, and he was praying for these people. And the people there said, oh, this guy has been, deaf all of his life, and now he can hear. He's like, really? Oh, yeah, that's true. Well, how much of that was suggestion? How much of that was maybe just a story a little bit bigger than it actually was? Can God heal? God can do anything he wants. But healing is not part of our arsenal. Our arsenal is the armor of God. It's the breastplate of righteousness. It's the helmet of truth. It's the sword of the Spirit. It's those things. Those are our defensive and offensive armaments. And that's what we use. But we don't use all this other stuff. We should pray. Absolutely, we should pray about things. Could we see miracles? Statistically, people who are prayed for do get better and get better more often. That's good. But you don't see lepers just getting healed like this. People who've had body parts lopped off just put back on. We don't see that. And so we can't expect it, even though the prosperity preachers would have you thinking that we can, go off and do those kinds of things. So I just wanted to touch on that because, it sounds nice. It sounds, God gave us a reprieve. God gave us one day where, in this case, where I started, Dennis Prager went in and, glory be to God. The doctor said, you better say goodbye. And doggone it, the stubborn old goat, he got better. Well, he got better because he's a stubborn old goat, and his body is still functioning well enough to live. It wasn't God reaching down from heaven and fiddling with fate, if you will. So that's all I have for you right now. If you disagree with me, please comment and let's have a discussion about this. But otherwise, signs and wonders and these kind of miracles just don't mix with the gospel of the grace of God, Paul's mystery gospel, where we are today. And until next time, God bless.